Thank you to Kenzie Bruce for his incredibly generous support on Patreon. Alela versus Piru, Evelyn, and Belbe. A 2-lander, one of which is Cabal Coffers, so that doesn't count. It's a shame because we've got a turn 2 Bitter Blossom there otherwise. But we will mulligan into another 2-lander with Bitter Blossom again, so that's good. Draw into an Arid Mesa, so that's a good excuse to get down a Triome here. Everyone playing tap lands, Piru going for a Rakdos Signet on turn 2. We will play a Bitter Blossom, draw into Shark Typhoon. Belbe on turn 2. And then Gilded Drake into play, going to steal away the Belbe from the Golgari player. We see a turn 3 Solemn Simulacrum for Piru, getting the first fairy token from the Bitter Blossom. Not doing anything on turn 3 here, so I think it's going to be Mirror Made as a copy of the Solemn Simulacrum. Would be cool to get down 2 Bitter Blossoms, but I think ramping in the early game is the best thing for us. Noteworthy that we did gain a couple of mana from losing life to the Bitter Blossom there, so maybe could have played our own Solemn Simulacrum. That's a play that we can make next turn maybe. Or we could go for the Shark Typhoon. Anyway, Gilded Lotus swung in towards the Mardu player there. And they get an additional 2 mana thanks to the Belbe. So we're able to go for a turn 3 Gilded Lotus. Belbe in towards the owner of Belbe. And of course, once again, getting that 2 additional mana. And able to cast the Grixis commander, Evelyn the Covetous. Solemn Simulacrum in towards the Belbe owner as well. Likely to do a bit of ramping here. I haven't counted the colours up, but might be able to get down Piru here. Okay, in response to blocks, tapping some mana. And ninjutsuing in a Nashi Moonsage's Scion. So exiling the top card there. They've only got 1 mana held up though. So exiled so far with a collection counter on Ugin, a counterspell, a mountain, and an isolated chapel from us. And then the rat here just got rid of a Cathar's Crusade, Painful Truths, a Blasphemous Act, and a Sylvan Scrying. And they've got that 2 mana from the Belbe available to them, so 3 at the second main phase. So deciding to cast our Cathar's Crusade, which does take it out of exile, so yeah, if that gets wiped out we might be able to pull it back. Solemn Simulacrum into play again. So we lose our life to the Bitter Blossom, don't necessarily need to swing in if that's the case. And that is a Witness Protection. No evasion on this yet. So I don't necessarily need to use Witness Protection. It'd be good to get down the Shark Typhoon, but we're not going to be casting non-creature spells for a while. I think I'll just take advantage and go for the Solemn Simulacrum here. And then maybe we can hold up the Spellstutter Sprite if we're desperate. So we get the Belbe mana thanks to losing life to Bitter Blossom. Get down the Solemn Simulacrum for only 2 mana in that case. Shepherd of Rot into play for the Golgari player. Followed by a Twilight Prophet, Rakdos Signet for Evelyn, then casting Arcane Signet, Atsushi the Blazing Sky being cast by Piru. That will trigger the Cathar's Crusade, so a plus counter on all of their stuff. And now Nashi swings in towards the Grixis player, so we'll see if they allow that through and give them a free spell here. Throwing away the Belbe could be relevant to us. That means that we don't get the ramp next turn. So that does mean that we can't go for our commander next turn and still hold up the Spellstutter Sprite. And that's a Mask of Grizzlebrand. Yeah, tempted to counter that, but it would be good to make the Mardu player the threat. And so everyone's looking in that direction as opposed to looking at us. A land here would be really nice. We'll get another fairy token. Alright, excellent. Draw into Vault of the Archangel with a bunch of creatures in place, so that could definitely come in handy. So now can get down Alela, Artful Provocateur. In my experience she's very difficult to keep in play because players are often very scared of her, so do actually want to play her when we can actually protect the card. Once again gonna hold back here and allow our opponents to swing in at each other. Belbe being cast once again, so we'll start seeing that ramp once more. Comes into play under the owner of Belbe, of course. They do now have the City's Blessing as well. We each lose just 1 life, I think it is, to the Shepherd of Rot. No, we lost 2 life there. There must be another zombie here. Oh, she's a Phyrexian zombie elf. So they get 6 colourless mana there, thanks to the Shepherd of Rot. 3 cards in hand. And that is a Karn Scion of Urza. Not worth countering. Going for the plus on that, giving it 6 loyalty. And they're giving the option to the Mardu player of which cards to put in exile and which one to put in hand. So one goes into exile, one goes into hand. They cast the Vampiric Tutor that they were just given straight away. And there is a Torment of Hellfire with a silver counter on it in exile. Assuming that they still have the Twilight Prophet in play next turn, we will see what they tutored for during their next upkeep. Gonti, Lord of Luxury, so they could exile the top card of the library that's just been tutored for here. Not sure why they went for the Vamp Tutor without being able to draw into the thing. So Gonti going to exile it face down, we won't see it. The Mask of Grizzlebrand going to give Flying and Lifelink to the Nashi. Atsushi swings in towards Karn, and Nashi in at the Grixis player. Gilded Drake being thrown in the way of the dragon, so no damage going to be dealt to Karn here. Nashi does land, however, so the Grixis player goes down to 33. Nashi going to trigger and exile the top cards. So exiling a Forest, a Firecat Blitz, Florian, and a Rhystic Study. Belbe going to trigger at the end here as well, so we'll just gain 2 mana. Casting our Rhystic Study for free, stealing all our good stuff. Junji the Midnight Sky being cast after that. I was hoping that we'd be able to get through to this player and make a bit more mana, but doesn't look as though that will be the case, unfortunately. Alright, we draw into Scion of Una, so that will give our commander, as well as all these other fairies, Shroud. Makes our Spell Stutter Sprite even better. We can hold on to that for now, though. If we go Witness Protection here onto the Junji, then they won't be able to block there because it won't have flying anymore. And then we can hit a couple of players and we'll gain a decent ton of mana at the second main. So I think that's worth doing here. Rhystic Study triggers, of course, so we will pay into the Rhystic Study. Obviously Alela going to trigger as well and make us even more fairies. So we'll swing a token in at the Mardu player. Alela can go in at Evelyn. And then maybe we'll throw away one of the fairies, but we'll hit Karn for a couple as well. Could have put the All That Glitters onto the Alela to buff it and most likely definitely get through to Karn, but I want to save that for when the Shark Typhoon is in play, preferably. And we probably are going to be doing that this turn. So Karn goes down to 2, we hit our opponents for a little bit of mana, Belbe goes on the stack, and we get 6 mana there, so we tap down for a blue, get down the Shark Typhoon, and we've got enough for the tax on the Rhystic Study as well. So obviously Alela going to trigger once again, gets us another flying blocker. And I think we're okay holding up Spell Stutter Sprite or the Scion of Una again. The Twilight Prophet going on the stack here. And they just revealed to us with that a Vicious Conquistador, so we all got drained for 1. Could have been a lot worse. Plussing on the Karn again. And they just reveal a couple of swamps. So one goes into hand, one goes into exile. Shepherd of Rot is going to deal 2 to us all again. They gain 6 mana from their commander. And this is the type of thing we've been holding up the counterspell for. We see a Toxic Deluge from our opponent. So they've lost 6 life to that. Let's see if they want to pay the Rhystic Study tax. They do, so the Mardu player stays stuck on 2 cards over there. We will go for our counter creature. And we too will pay into the study tax. Okay, and a counter spell going on to the Spell Stutter Sprite. How much would they have had to pay there on Spell Stutter? I actually didn't work it out. That would have been 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. They could actually have afforded to pay for the Toxic Deluge anyway. It just would have swallowed up 7 of their mana. Yeah, I think they've wasted a counter spell there. I think I would have forced the Golgari player to dump 7 mana into the Spell Stutter Sprite there. Well, not to worry, we will draw a couple of cards here. Thanks to the Solemn Simulacrum. Noteworthy that the Mask of Grizzlebrand is going to draw the Mardu player a bunch of cards as well. I don't think that was the best board wipe in all honesty. But at least our Spell Stutter Sprite got a counter spell out of the Grixis player's hand. A Solemn Simulacrum died from the Mardu player as well, so they will draw a card. Atsushi will exile the top 2 cards. We can play it until the end of the turn. We draw into a Supreme Verdict, not doing too well on the mana front, annoyingly. The cards exiled an Exotic Orchard and a Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. So they've got until the end of their next turn to play those. And they've only got 3 cards in hand there from the Solemn. Did they not put the life into the mask? They should have done. It did die, didn't it? Yeah, here it is in the bin, so... yeah, not sure why they didn't put the life into that. They probably should have done. Vicious Conquistador being played, and the Ristic Study tax was paid on there. Once a few players get more cards in hand, I'll be more willing to go for the Time Twister, but I'll be refilling their hand at the moment, so not particularly in love with the idea of doing that. Evelyn into play once again, and not paying the Ristic Study tax because they can't afford it. So Mardu goes up to 4 cards in hand. They'll have 5 at the beginning of their turn. They've got 3 legendary creatures available to them for this thing, so I suppose they might as well play it here and leave cards in their hand. Obviously I don't know what they've got available to them though. Instead deciding on Piru the Volatile, which triggers our Cthulhu's Crusade on their side of the field, and that immediately becomes an 8/8. Exiled off the top with Evelyn, by the way. An Apex Devastator, Thespian Stage, and a Time Spiral from us. Okay, we draw into a Void Rend. We can get a couple of mana on our second main phase. I'm just wondering if it's worth going for the Supreme Verdict now, because it blows up 3 commanders. I do have more board wipes in this deck than I would normally run, because I know how difficult it is to get into the long game in an Esper deck, so yeah, I decided to put more board wipes in here than spot removal. I think there's about 4 or 5 board wipes in here. Yeah, let's go for the Supreme Verdict. That will trigger the Shark Typhoon. Unfortunately, we're about to blow up the shark that we make. Pay into the Ristic Study. I'll hold up the Scion of Una, and we might give the Mardu player a card with Ristic Study. So down comes our first 4/4 shark token, and successfully blowing up all of the commanders. Karn ticking down here, so trying to get something that has a silver counter on it. And yeah, that was the Torment of Hailfire that they've put back in hand. So now we see a crop rotation, grabbing themselves a Cabal Coffers. They've only got 3 swamps in play though, making 3 black mana, converting that from the forests, tapping down 10 mana in total, including the Gilded Lotus. And going for the Torment of Hellfire now, not paying into the Ristic Study tax. X is 8 on the Torment of Hellfire, so could just take 24 life to that. We could just discard a bunch of cards and aim for the Time Twister next turn as well. So we'll get rid of Void Rend, get rid of Mesa Enchantress, discard all that glitters, and then we're taking 15 life, I think. So our opponents end up at 13-12, we end up at 14, and Belbe is at 24. They have discarded or sacrificed their own Evelyn, so Animate Dead into that. Not paying for the Ristic Study tax. I'm not as worried about that now, thanks to the Time Twister. Everyone's about to have cards in hand. Exiling off the top, a Helm of the Host from the commander, a Fumigate, and an Urborg. Hopefully play the Urborg, that would be good. Or can they only cast things with this? You may play a card from exile, so they can go for the Urborg. Doesn't look as though they're going to, though. Alright, Time Spiral. So they're doing our job for us, effectively. That means that that's going to save us 3 mana next turn. Does mean they're going to untap their own lands, though. And there's not much harm in not paying the Ristic Study tax now, because they're about to shuffle whatever they draw. Alright, so we had a lot of cards drawn there. Up to 7, obviously. Only got into 1 land, though. Didn't get into any further ramp. They untapped all 6 of their lands, of course. Dropping a mountain. So not playing anything from exile. Oh, and Lord Xander the Collector into play here. That does trigger the Evelyn, so more exile off the top. A Castle Lochthwain, Sky Diamond, a Sol Ring, and just a Tainted Field from us. Lord Xander had the Mardu player discard half of their cards there as well, so they just got rid of some lands. Playing out a Boros Signet now. Then throwing down a bounce land, the Nashi comes back into play without Ninjutsu. Cthulhu's Crusade still in play under their control over there, so it does enter with a plus counter, equipping the Mask of Grizzlebrand onto there. Okay, finally getting into some ramp. There we see a Smothering Tithe. Let's make ourselves a Scrubland, and we're pretty far behind here. I'm wondering if to give the Mardu player a few cards to the Ristic Study so that we can play out the Swiftfoot Boots. Yeah, I'm hoping we're going to get into mana from the Smothering Tithe, so we'll still be able to hold up counter magic Shark Typhoon, going to make a 4/4 shark. So go against my better judgment and not pay into the tax. Play Swiftfoot Boots, and yeah, I won't pay into the tax on that either. So they've drawn 2 cards off us here, which doesn't feel good. They do draw, of course, so Smothering Tithe already making us a treasure token. So I do feel okay putting the Swiftfoot Boots onto the Scion of Una. This gives other Fairy Shroud, but doesn't have Shroud itself, so now has Hexproof and Haste, and do a point of damage to the Khan. It's noteworthy that Bitter Blossom does count as a fairy because it's a tribal enchantment, so that has Shroud as well. Mana Crypt being cast by Belbe, and they are not paying the Rhystic Study tax either, which bodes well for us on mana, but it is giving the scary Mardu player a lot of cards. Seems as though everyone's pretty much given up on paying that. Calm plussing again. And we will, what do we do? Choose a card. Chosen card will be put into the hand, so we obviously give them a command tower. Toxic Deluge is hopefully going to be exiled permanently, because I'm hoping Calm won't see another turn cycle. So they're going for that Torment of Hailfire again. They've got some really good draws over there. So our opponent's just playing it out and not insta-scooping, that's really good. Piru up to 7 cards in hand. So we get another mana from the Smothering Tithe, which means we'll only need 1 more to cast the Dovin's Veto. I don't think this player's going to do anything about a Fierce Guardianship anyway. I'd like to hold on to Fierce Guardianship for the commander being in play and protecting that, but we've got Shroud anyway, so I'll just use the 3 mana spell here. That will trigger the Shark Typhoon, so we get a 3/3 shark in the air. Definitely going to be using the Vault of the Archangel, I think. Not going to pay into the Rhystic Study so that we get a treasure token straight away. Okay, we didn't get a treasure token there, so they must have paid into it. I thought they only had 2 mana held up. Or they chose not to... Yeah, they chose not to draw a card there, because they're still at 7, curiously. So Swords to Plowshares now going on to the Evelyn, as opposed to the Lord Xander. Luckily, the controller of Lord Xander does give us a treasure token during the beginning of the turn, so we've got Dovin's Veto held up again. A Mind Slaver now. Who are they going to gain control of is the question. Rhystic Study not being paid, so they obviously want to crack the Mind Slaver here. Yeah, we might be just setting up the Mardu player for an easier win here, or at least an easier turn, but I don't like the idea of them taking control of our board. We've got the best board with regards to creatures, and they might try and knock a few players out with our creatures, so I'm going to go for the veto on that. Okay, and that has that player scoop it up. I'm not going to pay into the tax here either, because we want as much mana as possible. Totally ignoring the Planeswalker so that Nashi can go in and get a free spell here. And in all fairness, we can get rid of Khan during our next turn. Belbe has just gone AFK here seemingly as well, so hopefully they won't time out. Yep, and then just timing out on us. Welcome to Magic Online. I thought this was actually a really good game. I think they fixed Magic Online now, where if you're in the middle of an attack there, you still get the attack trigger. They'll just see less cards, unfortunately. Oh, do they not? Oh, that's shit. So Nashi not getting to exile a card from us there, annoyingly. We'll be able to see what card they were going to have access to at least. So here comes Piru into play. I think we'll be able to deal with Piru alright. Kthar's Crusade triggering, plus counter on everything. Bajuka Bog exiling all of our stuff. I don't think that really matters. So what we can do here is go wide on our opponent with an Elishnorn. I don't think we need to worry about Vault of the Archangel anymore. They've got a single mana held up, so might still be able to survive. We'll see if we can land a Swiftfoot Boots. We draw into an Underground Sea. Got 3 treasures available to us. It'd be good to land Coastal Piracy, so even though we might not be able to get rid of our opponent here if the Elishnorn is removed, at least we can probably land a hit with Coastal Piracy in play and refill our hand. They could have Darkness, but it's very, very rare that you see people play Darkness. So it might be a little bit risky, just relying on the Elishnorn here. We will have to let them draw a card. That will obviously get us a treasure as well, though, if they decide to draw. They didn't draw previously. They do go up to 8. Alright, and our opponent just scoops it up there, so obviously they didn't have anything. We were going to play another spell there, so they could have got another draw and got into... They didn't exile that Swords previously, did they? No, they could still have access to Swords and Path. We were only dealing... They block there, it's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 and 9 damage to them without the Elish Norn. So they could have survived there. Because like I said, we were going to cast the Coastal Piracy and not pay the tax, so they could have got into removal for the Elish Norn, but obviously didn't fancy their odds, so let's say that we were always going to win that one. Hopefully you all enjoyed this revisit to Alela. I've had a few people request this recently, and in typical Alela fashion it is very difficult to keep her in play. I think she would have been much better as a 3-mana commander in Esper, and not giving that +1 buff to flyers. I think that would have made her much more viable, but yeah, as it stands, a 4-mana commander that's really difficult to keep in play. In Esper colours, where it's difficult to ramp, it's just, yeah, it's a tricky one. But if you want to see more from it, then be sure to let me know. Massive thank you to the few of you who are patrons that support the channel so consistently. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.